Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's start the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles. I always tell you that the Sunday newspaper can be very, very important. Many students neglect the Sunday paper thinking there are no articles that are important for the exam. But trust me, every Sunday there are a lot of key articles, especially related to environment ecology, science and tech, and international relations. So we will cover these 10 topics in detail along with the necessary PIB integration wherever required. We will cover some of the important PIB press releases related to these topics or any additional press releases as well. So the idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. So before we start, I have a very important announcement. Unacademy will be conducting a free weekly current affairs test under the UCAN program. UCAN stands for Unacademy's Current Affairs Navigator, under which we provide dedicated current affairs classes, which are subject specific. Every month, we have 15 classes of current affairs taken by respective teachers of those particular subjects. This program is available only to our paid students, to our plus, platinum, and iconic students. But however, to make the initiative widely available, the test series is being made freely available to all the students. So if you want to take up the weekly current affairs test, get a all India rank and test your performance, this test is free for everyone, open for everyone. You just have to scan the QR code on the screen and enroll for this weekly current affairs test. With this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 14, there's a detailed article related to the controversy surrounding a movie that is Satluj, which has been recently taken down from Z5 OTT platform. I'm sure many of you must be aware of this controversy. So let's understand what is the controversy related to this movie. On what grounds has the government ordered the OTT platform to take down this particular movie? Let's examine the legal and the security implications of this particular development. The movie Satluj, which was supposed to be released a long time ago, it stars Diljit Dosanjh and it is set in the background of Punjab's violent insurgency and terror phase of 1980s and 1990s. It mainly focuses on alleged human right violations by security forces, particularly by Punjab police. It focuses on allegations of illegal extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, custodial torture and killings. So definitely the theme of the movie is very sensitive and quite provocative as well. So this movie is largely based on the life of Jaswant Singh Kalra, a well-known human rights activist who was very active in Punjab in 1990s. He was leading the efforts to bring out any human right violations and excesses committed by police and security forces in Punjab during the heady days of militancy in the state of Punjab. Now, when you look at the Khalistan movement, the Khalistan movement posed one of the most serious security challenges for India in the 1980s and 1990s. There was an element of local support that existed, where multiple Khalistani terror groups and extremist insurgent organizations had created a ground network. There was cross border support coming from Pakistani state actors, such as the ISI. The ISI was pumping drugs, money, weapons into the hands of Khalistani terrorists. It was sheltering the Khalistani terror leaders, giving them training support and creating a safe sanctuary for them. Plus, the movement enjoyed a degree of global support, especially in Western European countries, in Canada, in US, amongst few radicalized sections within the Sikh diaspora. So in 1980s, this was clearly India's biggest security challenge. So to deal with the threat, India introduced a number of security measures. India introduced the AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in Punjab by declaring Punjab as a disturbed area under the Disturbed Areas Act. With the declaration of Punjab as a disturbed area under the Disturbed Areas Act, AFSPA was extended to Punjab. Until then, AFSPA was used only in Northeast India to counter Northeast insurgency. For the first time, it was expanded outside the Northeast and brought in place in Punjab, which would give extraordinary powers to the security forces. Under AFSPA, security forces have a right to kill. Experts and critics call it a license to kill. Security forces can open fire at a suspect without waiting for orders from the higher command or without facing any consequences, and they enjoy complete legal immunity for their actions. They can even carry out search, arrest, and even destroy property without a warrant. So these are indeed extraordinary powers that are vested in the hands of security forces where AFSPA is in place. So this extreme provision is used in conflict hit areas, areas affected by insurgency, terrorism, and especially if there is a cross border element and if there is a state sponsored element involved to protect the sovereignty, security of the state, the defense of India. This extraordinary law is brought in place to provide legal immunity to the armed forces, the paramilitary forces, and the police forces, which might be engaging in counter terrorist and counter insurgency operations. But critics argue that such extraordinary provisions are often misused. This immunity has often led to large scale allegations of human rights violations. We have seen this happening in Northeast India as well. For example, take a look at Manipur or take a look at other insurgency affected regions like Tripura, Meghalaya, where many such allegations have come up against security forces. Later, when Kashmir militancy broke out post 1987, AFSPA was extended to Jammu and Kashmir and remains in place even today. So, in Jammu and Kashmir as well, there are many similar allegations of alleged human rights violations by security forces. See, please understand, Indian security forces are professional. They understand the law of the land. They understand that there can be accountability in case of abuse of law. But however, there might be rogue officers who might have misused the authority given to them. There have been certain instances. In some cases, it has been proven as well through a judicial process that some rogue officers have misused such provisions to commit human rights excesses. So in Punjab, there have been serious allegations, particularly against Punjab police. In the fight against Khalistan movement, the Punjab police was completely restructured and reformed in 1980s. It was given extraordinary leeway by the state government, by the center, to ensure that the security threat was dealt with at any cost. And Punjab police was brought under the leadership of legendary IPS officer KPS Gill, who is widely credited with decimating the Khalistan movement and the ground network, but is also equally criticized for being responsible for the wide abuses that Punjab police has allegedly committed. So during this phase, there were laws like TADA, which was introduced to counter terrorism, the Terrorist Activities and Disruptive Activities Prevention Act, brought out in 1985, also gave extraordinary powers to the police and law enforcement agencies to counter terrorism, which allegedly enabled custodial torture, illegal kidnappings, enforced disappearances. So, during this heightened phase of militancy and the heightened phase of counterterrorism, counterinsurgency in Punjab, a lot of allegations came up that Punjab police were responsible for various human rights violations. So, activists like Jaswant Singh Kalra was leading the efforts in 1990s to expose these incidents. And according to documented reports, around 25,000 individuals had reportedly disappeared and had been secretly cremated. So it was in this particular matter that Jaswant Singh Kalra in 1995, he was kidnapped right in front of his house. And after that, he was never found again. So this case was later handled by the CBI following a huge uproar and controversy. And the CBI investigation pointed out that Punjab police officers had illegally kidnapped the human rights activist, Jaswant Singh Kalra, and they had taken him to a police station in Taran Taran, which was one of the hot spots of Khalistani extremism. Reportedly, he was tortured in custody and killed in custody. This is as per the CBI report. So it's on this tragic story that the movie Satluj is based upon. Now, this movie was supposed to release in a theater. Now, any film which goes for a theatrical release, it has to go through a certification process. The certification process is handled by the CBFC, the Central Board for Film Certification, which comes under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. And as per the provisions of the Cinematograph Act 1952, a film is certified, and if necessary, the CBFC can even recommend a few cuts that the filmmakers have to introduce in order to make the movie palatable to the Indian audience. On specific grounds, if let's say a movie is having gore and violence, or excessive nudity, or if it is using a lot of explicit language, or it has a theme or a message which could threaten India's security or which could incite riots and violence and disrupt public order. On certain grounds, the CBFC can issue orders to the filmmakers to cut some parts of the movie in order to get the certification. And accordingly, the movie is certified as universal, or age based rating is provided, or adult rating is provided. And then the movie is set for a theatrical release. But in the case of Satluj, starring Diljit Dosanjh, the CBFC had recommended 127 cuts in the movie. Just imagine that. A movie roughly with a span of, I think, 3.5 hours, 127 cuts were recommended by CBFC. This process went on for a very long time. It delayed the theatrical release. Eventually, the filmmakers were frustrated. So finally, they opted for OTT release. The movie never hit the theaters. It never got certified by the CBFC. It directly made a debut on OTT platform, that is Z5. And within 2 days after its release on Z5, it was taken down by the OTT platform. It has been taken down only for the Indian audience. It's not available for streaming in India. But on Z Global, the movie is still available for the global audience. So outside of India, the movie is still streamable on Z Global platform, but within India, it has been taken down. And why has it been taken down? According to Z5, it has been taken down on the orders issued by the government of India. As per the communication received from the government of India, the movie has been taken down. Now, what is the legal validity of this? On what grounds, under what legal provisions can the government order a OTT platform to take down its content? Because, see, please understand, OTT platforms are not regulated by CBFC. It's only films which release in a theater are regulated by Central Board for Film Certification as per the provisions of Cinematograph Act of 1952. When it comes to OTT platforms, there is a completely separate regulation mechanism that we have. This is provided under the IT rules of 2021. The Information Technology, Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code. These set of IT rules that were notified in 2021 under the IT Act provides for regulation of content on OTT platforms or over the top streaming platforms. Along with this, the government can invoke few extraordinary powers of the IT Act, such as Section 69A, under which the government can order any tech platform to take down harmful content on certain specific grounds as listed under Section 69 of the IT Act. It is through these provisions that the government has ordered Z5 to take down the movie. Now, when you look at regulation of OTT platforms, as I said, OTT platforms are not regulated by CBFC. They are not regulated by Ministry of Information and Broadcasting directly. It doesn't fall under their direct regulation. It is regulated through the IT rules and provisions of the IT Act. That includes the controversial Section 69A. Now, as per the regulation under IT rules, OTT platforms have been encouraged to provide for self-classification of their content. This was mandated in 2021. All OTT platforms have to self-classify the content on their platform, provide a rating, universal or age appropriate rating, like UA 13 plus, meaning it is appropriate for those who are above 13 years of age, or UA 16 plus, meaning it's appropriate for those who are 16 years and above, so that minor children are not exposed to harmful content, or adult rating if it is not suitable for minors at all. So this self classification has been mandated. Plus, OTT platforms have to provide effective parental lock mechanism in the user interface. They should allow parents to lock certain adult content, ensure it's not available to children, and ensure that parents have that degree of control over the platforms. And third, they have to display clear advisory or ratings regarding the content of the movie. I'm sure when you see, let's say, a movie or a web series on any platform, on Netflix, on Amazon Prime, on Geo Hotstar, whatever platform it is, when you play the movie or the web series, at the start, you see a clear disclaimer at the top as to what kind of content is present in it. If it has nudity, if it has explicit language, if it contains excessive abuse of drugs, tobacco, alcohol, right? Everything is mentioned at the start so that you can decide whether you want to watch it or not. So this has been mandated through IT rules. Though many OTT platforms were already following this even before 2021, now it has become a legal mandate under IT rules of 2021. Now, apart from this, there is a certain mechanism through which the government exercises direct control over OTT platforms through Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. So for this, I will take the help of a PIB press release from the Ministry of Information Broadcasting. So this is how we integrate PIB articles into our newspaper discussion so that it's a comprehensive discussion. According to the press release, the ministry has recognized that freedom of expression, which includes creative expression and creative freedom, is a fundamental right guaranteed under Article 19 of the Constitution. But however, it's not an absolute right. There can be reasonable restrictions on Article 19. Now, as per the reasonable restrictions, the government is placing a regulatory mechanism and a grievance redressal mechanism. A three-tiered grievance redressal mechanism has been put in place to ensure that OTT content can be regulated. At level 1, each OTT platform should have a self-regulatory body. For example, the Z Media Group, Netflix, Amazon Prime, each one of them, they should have a self-regulatory body at the level of the company, at the level of the OTT platform, which can receive the grievances, the complaints of the viewers, the audience. If the audience feels that some content is objectionable, if it goes against the security of the country, or if it goes against the values and the morality of the society, then the audience should have an option to raise a complaint against the content. So at level 1, each platform should have a self regulatory body. And level 2, at the industry level, the OTT industry should come together to set up a self regulatory body which would be headed by a retired judge. And then comes level 3, where government will exercise a direct oversight mechanism. The Ministry of Information Broadcasting will exercise a direct oversight. If a grievance cannot be redressed at level 1 and level 2, then you can go on appeal to level 3, where the government will issue direct orders to the OTT platform to appropriately take down harmful content. So this allows the government to directly play a role in regulating content on OTT platforms. So this combined with provisions of IT Act, specifically Section 69A, allows the government to issue takedown orders. Because if the platforms don't comply, then they risk losing the safe harbor or the legal immunity which is granted to them under the IT Act. The IT Act grants safe harbor provision to all tech intermediaries because they are not directly responsible for the content hosted on their platform. Right? This applies primarily for social media firms and other tech platforms as well. But if they refuse to comply with the orders of the government, if they don't cooperate with the authorities to take down harmful content, they they can they can be stripped of legal immunity and the safe harbor provision, meaning the company executives will now be liable for criminal prosecution. So under section 69A of IT Act 2000, the government can issue takedown orders for even OTT platforms on specific grounds. This applies for any tech platform, any website, any digital media, right? On any IT platform, tech enabled platform, the government can issue takedown and blocking orders on specific grounds. These grounds include sovereignty and integrity of the nation. If any online content is threatening the sovereignty integrity of the nation, the government can issue a takedown order. This comes from the Ministry of Electronics and IT. If content is threatening the security of the state or defense of India, or if it threatens friendly relations of India with other partners and other countries, or if it could disrupt public order, or if the content could result in the incitement to a cognizable offense, on these specific grounds, the government can issue takedown orders. But however, what makes this provision legal and constitutional is that there is a certain procedure, there are certain safeguards to ensure that the government doesn't abuse or misuse this provision. Because, see, in 2015, there was one landmark case at the Supreme Court, the Shreya Singhal case, that reviewed the provisions of the IT Act. There was one notorious provision under the IT Act, it was Section 66A, that dealt with objectionable content. Now, the very term objectionable is it's subjective, right? It can have different interpretations. What is objectionable to me may not be objectionable to you. So, under Section 66A, government had the authority to take down any objectionable post. So, even people who are putting up something on Facebook or sharing a message on WhatsApp, they were being arrested under Section 66A just because the police or the law enforcement would feel that this content was objectionable. And usually this was being done on political grounds. Those who were posting memes and cartoons about political leaders or government leaders, they were being targeted. Innocent people who had not committed any crime. So the matter had reached the Supreme Court, and in the landmark Shreya Singhal case of 2015, the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A as unconstitutional. In the same judgment, the Supreme Court reviewed the constitutionality of Section 69A as well. But Section 69A was upheld as constitutional by the court. Why? Because this provision had certain procedures, inbuilt legal procedures to be followed by the government, and inbuilt safeguards to prevent its abuse and misuse, which was not there in Section 66A. Since Section 66A was arbitrary and it gave a very subjective definition of objectionable content and it was blatantly misused, there were no procedural safeguards. This provision was struck down as unconstitutional, whereas Section 69A was upheld because it had certain legal safeguards and procedural safeguards that were built into it. So, what are these procedural safeguards? There are three specific requirements under Section 69A. If the government is issuing a takedown order on any of these grounds, as mentioned above, then this has to be given in writing. The reason has to be mentioned in a written order issued by the government so that the publisher or the content creator they know as to why their content is being blocked. So they should receive a written copy of the order clearly stating on what ground has the content been taken down. So this allows the publisher or the content creator to now seek reprieve or legal remedy from the court. If the publisher or the content creator, if they feel that their fundamental right under Article 19 is being curbed in an unfair manner, they can approach the court using the writ jurisdiction to ensure that their fundamental right is protected, because now they have a written copy of the order where the government is clearly mentioning the reason for which the content has been taken down. Along with that, the other requirement is that the publisher or the content creator should be given an opportunity to be heard, to express their view, their standpoint before the content is taken down or blocked. And third, there should be a review committee. The government should set up a committee to review the content to see whether it is in line with the legal provisions or not. These three legal safeguards are mandatory under Section 69A. So, if at all any online content is threatening the sovereignty of the nation, security of the state, defense of India, or friendly relations of the country, or public order, on these specific grounds, if government feels a content should be blocked, it should give a written order in writing. It should state the reason, make it available to that publisher or content creator so they know why the content has been blocked. And they should give an opportunity for the publisher to be heard. And also, an expert committee should be constituted to review the orders. These three safeguards are built into it. And if at all the publisher is not satisfied or the content creator is not satisfied, they can always take that written order, approach the court, particularly the High Court, under Article 226, file a writ petition stating that my fundamental right is being violated by the government in order to protect the fundamental right guaranteed under Article 19. So this remedy will be available, which makes Section 69 legal and constitutional, whereas 66A was blatantly unconstitutional and was struck down by the Supreme Court. Now, this ruling was very, very crucial because, see, in the other cases like K.S. Puttaswamy judgment of 2017, when Supreme Court declared right to privacy as a fundamental right under Article 21, the Supreme Court introduced the constitutionality test of proportionality, that any action of the government, particularly when it comes to blocking content, it should be proportional to the threat posed with the content. This was reiterated in the Anuradha Basin case of 2020. So it has to be proportional, which means the courts can test whether the orders of the government is it proportional to the threat posed by the content. Now, when you look at what the government has been doing in the case of movies like Satluj, the written orders are not being issued by the government, meaning the government is making the reason confidential. There is a provision under the blocking rules, rule number 16, which allows the government to maintain confidentiality. On what grounds has the government ordered the content to be blocked? So, right now, in the case of Satluj, Z5 doesn't know what is the reason. Movie makers also don't know what is the exact reason. Is it because the movie was threatening the defense of India? Or is it because the movie was threatening the sovereignty integrity of the nation? So they don't have a written order on what grounds the government has blocked the content. Now, what will happen because of this? Because of this, when you don't have a written copy, the publisher never gets a chance to be heard. And now, if they approach the court, on what grounds will the court test the validity of the order? So you can't effectively challenge in a court of law when you don't have a written order stating on what grounds your content has been blocked by the government. And that is where the procedural safeguards are being broken down. And that is where the criticism and the concern comes up. Yes, agreed that a movie like Satluj in current times, when there is an attempt to revive Khalistan movement, could possibly pose a threat to the security of the state, to the sovereignty and integrity of the nation. But the government will have to give the orders in writing, stating the specific reason, allowing the publisher to be heard, setting up a committee to review the content, and giving a chance for the publisher to approach the court if they feel that their fundamental right is being curbed. Now, if they approach the court, most likely the court would not be able to verify because there is no written copy, as the government has made the reason confidential by invoking Rule 16 of the blocking rules. So that is the criticism which is coming up. So, with regard to OTT platforms, what we are seeing is that the government is using its executive powers post the publication of a movie to try and block the content, which is quite concerning because you do not have adequate safeguards to protect basic fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 19. This, of course, can be challenged through a writ petition under Article 226 directly at the High Court. The publishers can challenge this, stating that my right to free speech and expression under Article 19(1) subclause A has been violated, or my right to practice any profession or carry on any trade or occupation guaranteed under Article 19(1) subclause G is being violated. On these specific grounds, it can be challenged, but the courts won't be able to examine this in detail. Why? Because there's no written copy, there's no reason why the government is blocking this, and that will weaken the case to begin with. So the government has to stop the confidentiality, issue a written order on what grounds is the content being blocked. And that is what is necessary to bring some balance into this particular debate. Now, based on what we have discussed, please take up this mains practice question and kindly practice your answer writing. Now, moving on, we have another interesting article on the relevance of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This column has been published because just a few days ago, the NATO summit took place in Ankara, in Turkey. I'm sure most of you must be aware that in the last 1.5 years, there is a big friction and divide within NATO, all thanks to Donald Trump, his rhetoric and his erratic statements and his erratic policies. It has led to a lot of concern within NATO countries, whether the group will even survive or not. The US has even threatened to exit NATO, right? The US has even threatened the sovereignty and territorial interests of NATO members like Denmark and the others. So there is a concern amongst the European members of NATO whether the organization would even survive. What does it mean for European security in the future? So, in this context, the NATO summit in Ankara was not expected to yield anything positive. But still, somehow, the European leaders managed to work it around. And all the NATO members did come out with a joint statement at the end of it, which was even signed by Donald Trump as well. Even Trump seemed to be satisfied at the end of the NATO summit in Ankara. So, what we need to do here is that first understand what is NATO and what is the complaint that Donald Trump has against NATO, what European countries are doing, and does the group remain relevant? That is something we'll try to examine in this discussion. NATO was established in 1949 through the North Atlantic Treaty, also known as the Washington Treaty. It was essentially a military alliance to safeguard the security interests of the Western Hemisphere, primarily the Western powers. It was built upon the Atlantic Charter of 1941. Under the Atlantic Charter, US and UK had come together to provide collective security to each other, to promote transatlantic security cooperation. This became the reference. Similarly, UK and France also had a security arrangement between them uh, in the post-Second World War period. So, on this basis, Western democracies, led by US and the transatlantic European powers, they came together, signed the Washington Treaty in 1949, establishing this military alliance called NATO. This was supposed to be a bulwark against the spreading communist influence led by the Soviet Union. It was meant to deter and counter the communist Eastern Bloc, led by the USSR and its allies in their Cold War rivalry with the Western Democratic Bloc. So it was always set out to be a security military platform focused on transatlantic security, primarily focused on European security, to defend and protect Europe from any possible Soviet and communist aggression. That was the primary purpose of this organization. And over the decades, it has served the interests of European members and as well as the United States. Of course, the US has played a much, much bigger role within NATO by contributing more funds, contributing more troops, arms, weapons, and military hardware. But the US has also equally benefited through the NATO. It's not just the European countries which have been dependent on it. The US has largely benefited from it. That is how US was able to project its military power across the world or get into military operations in different corners of the world. It was all because of the military support, the logistical support, the military bases that NATO countries were providing the American armed forces. Now, under NATO, there is one principle which is enshrined under Article 5, the principle of collective defense or mutual defense. Under the principle of collective defense, the members commit to each other that they will come to the assistance of the other if one NATO member were to be attacked by a non-NATO member. Meaning they will treat an attack on one member as an attack on the entire alliance, and they will organize collective defense. They will come to the military support of the other NATO country which has been attacked. This principle has been used only once. It has been invoked only once till date. That is after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, when US declared a global war on terrorism and decided to invade Afghanistan to topple the Taliban regime and to hunt Al Qaeda which was responsible for the terrorist attack. That's the only instance when the principle of collective defense has been invoked, where NATO members contributed troops to a US led military alliance, the International Security Assistance Force, which later invaded Afghanistan and toppled the Taliban regime. So today, the same United States is saying that European countries are not doing enough. Mr. Trump has said this during his first presidency as well. Between 2016 and 2020, he kept on accusing NATO of not doing enough. He was mainly blaming the European countries for being a burden, for not contributing enough. While there is some element of truth to what Trump is claiming, it's incorrect to say that the US has taken the entire burden and it gets no benefit in return. That's a completely misleading statement. And of course, that is what you can expect from an individual like Donald Trump. So after coming back into office for the second term, Trump has doubled down on this claim that NATO has become irrelevant, that European countries are sucking the blood of United States, that US is contributing more money, arms, weapons, and troops, and in return, Europe is doing nothing. That is what Trump has been building upon. But however, this claim is not entirely true. But of course, in the last few months, the tensions have exploded, especially after the Iran war began. Right, US and Israel triggered this uh, illegal, unsanctioned war against Iran. Following this, the NATO members refused to come to the support of the US, especially when Iran blockaded Hormuz and placed a chokehold on Hormuz Strait, and US had limited options to intervene. Trump requested NATO countries to come to support and join the war in Persian Gulf. But the European members, they refused because this was not a war of their choosing. More importantly, NATO was created mainly to deal with European centric threats, transatlantic threats to protect Europe, not to fight faraway, distant, unnecessary wars. So, correctly, few NATO members refused to cooperate, especially United Kingdom, Spain, France, and the others. Spain was the most vocal. The Spanish leader has not only been publicly critical of Donald Trump and his policies and his mindset, but he blanketly denied any support being provided during the war and shut off all Spanish military facilities from providing any kind of logistical support to American troops who were fighting the war against Iran. UK also initially denied access to its bases. Later, it was removed, and American troops were allowed to access British bases in UK. France placed a restriction banning the overflight of American warplanes, which were transiting uh, along European region to reach the Persian Gulf. So the NATO countries clearly took a stand against the American war with Iran, and they didn't want to get dragged into an unnecessary conflict. So this is what instigated Donald Trump. That's when Trump stepped up his rhetoric. See, one complaint that Trump has, which is genuine, is that European countries have become complacent about their security, which is true, especially after the end of the Cold War, after USSR disintegrated. European countries have not been spending enough on military defense and security. They have relied more on American spending and American support. Back in 2006, NATO countries had adopted a target to spend at least 2% of their GDP on military modernization to contribute equally as per their GDP numbers. But many countries did not meet the target. See, today NATO has 32 members. Recently, Sweden, Finland have joined. So it has 32 members today. Many of them did not meet the 2% GDP target with regard to military spending. So US was pushed to share a bigger burden, and Trump is right in this regard. But however, Trump cannot complain about this. Why? Because through NATO, US has been expanding its presence and influence. Without access to European military bases in UK, France, Spain, in Poland, in Germany, the Ramstein Airways, for example, US would have never been able to execute its faraway missions, be it the Iraq War or various American military interventions in West Asia, in Africa. They've all been based out of NATO bases and NATO logistical support. So American military dominance has been based on European support being provided. They've aligned their foreign policy with US, given complete support even when US was wrong, even when US was getting into controversial conflicts. NATO countries have stood with the US. So today, Trump has set a new target, a spending target, that NATO members have to spend 5% of their GDP, 3.5% of GDP on core military modernization, and 1.5% on critical infrastructure. But only 5 countries out of 32 have met the target. This was a target adopted at the last NATO summit in 2025. Only 5 NATO members are meeting the 5% GDP target on military spending. Rest of them are still yet to increase their military spending. And that's where Trump brings up this complaint that US is the one contributing and European countries are doing nothing. So right now, NATO is facing two big challenges, one external, one internal. The external challenge comes from Russia, as NATO is expanding eastwards by adding more members, including former Soviet states like the Baltic states. Russia was very concerned about the eastward expansion of NATO. That is what pushed Russia to threaten Ukraine, to occupy Crimea, and sponsor an insurgency in eastern Ukraine, and eventually attack Ukraine in 2022. So, as the Russian aggression continues, Europe and NATO faces a threat, an external threat. The internal threat is the friction within the group caused by Donald Trump and the American reversal of its policy towards NATO. So, will NATO survive this? Is the big question. So, what the European leaders have done at the recent Ankara summit is that they have carefully navigated this dilemma. They know that they need American support, they need American troops and weapons and funds, without which they can't deter the Russian threat. The Russian threat is a very real threat for Europe. Russia has been very aggressive, not just in Ukraine, but all across Europe. Russia is known to be very aggressive in its covert intelligence operations as well. And European countries do not stand a chance against Russian aggression without American support. So, on one hand, European leaders who dislike Trump and his erratic policies, they are already focusing on self-reliance, becoming a little more independent in their security. So, they have stepped up their military expenditure on one side. But they know that achieving self-reliance and becoming more autonomous in their security and foreign policy will take time. It might take 15, 20 years, right? Until then, in the short to medium term, they will have to be dependent on American military presence. So that is why they are trying to please Donald Trump on one side. So it's a mixed strategy, a balanced strategy that European leaders are adopting. On one side, they are critical of Trump's policies, focusing on their own autonomy and self reliance. They are increasing their military expenditure. They are coming together as a European bloc, finally. They know that they can't depend and rely just on NATO and leaders like Trump. At the same time, in the short term, they are appeasing Donald Trump. They know Trump is a guy who likes to be pleased, right? And this is what most experts agree about his psychology, his behavior. That if you want favors from US, you need to appeal to his ego, use flattery, use any tactic to placate Donald Trump. And that is what many countries and many powers have been doing, from South Korea to Philippines to European countries. They've all employed this strategy very effectively, where they give awards or give some gifts or make some big statements about Trump. Pakistan has done it, right? By nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. And that is what works with a leader like Donald Trump. So European countries are also doing the same. On one side, they are placating him, appeasing or appealing to his ego, right? They're catering to his personality disorder in a way. On the other hand, they are making long term plans to move away from their America dependency and become more self reliant. And that is the reason why you could see an outcome at the Ankara summit. Because European leaders managed to navigate the dilemma posed by Trump and Russia. On the other hand, Trump is directly talking to Putin to try and strike a deal over the war in Ukraine. Trump has cut down the support for Ukraine as well, which goes against European interests. So at the Ankara summit, the final outcome was quite interesting. What European countries have done is that they have stuck to their commitment that they will not get into unnecessary wars against Iran. Right? NATO was meant to be a Eurocentric, transatlantic centric group, mainly to deal with European security. The war against Iran has nothing to do with it. So, European countries have made it clear that they'll not get involved in Hormuz, they'll not get involved in the Persian Gulf. But at the same time, they have supported Trump with regard to his goals with Iran, that Iran should never have nuclear weapons, freedom of navigation should be restored at Hormuz. These diplomatic statements have been made to appease Donald Trump, to show that European countries are standing with the US, but they will not deploy troops and they'll not get into this war because this is not a war of their choosing. On the other hand, to please Donald Trump, they have announced massive investments in defense expenditure. They've announced a defense spending of $50 billion Most of these contracts will go to American defense companies, which will please Donald Trump and his core sponsors. They have announced a 70 billion euro military support for Ukraine, which means US need not bear the higher cost of supporting Ukraine in the war against Russia. So with this strategy, they convinced Trump to give a ironclad written commitment to Article 5. At the Ankara summit, Trump, who seemed happy at the end of it, he signed the statement giving an ironclad guarantee on Article 5 that US will someday, if required, come to the support and defense of Europe. And if principle of collective defense is invoked by European nations when they face a threat from Russia, US has now given an ironclad guarantee again, reiterating its commitment. So this middle ground was achieved because of tactful diplomacy by the European nations. But again, it does place a question mark on the relevance of NATO, the long-term relevance. It shows the internal fissures and the cracks which have developed as European countries have declined in terms of their diplomatic and military strength and economic strength. The cracks and fissures are very evident. The only way forward is for European countries to become self reliant and autonomous. And that is where an opportunity lies for India as well. India can now cultivate better relations in defense and security with European countries. And that is an opening that India should exploit. Because see, we can have good relations with Russia, we can have good relations with US, and we can also have parallel defense relations and close security ties with European countries as well. So based on what we have discussed, take up this main practice question and please practice your answer writing. Now moving on to the smaller articles in the newspaper, on page 12 there's an article that is flagging the serious challenges faced by India's shipping industry. See, right now the global economy and the shipping industry has been dealt with massive shocks, geopolitical shocks. I'm not just referring to the Iran war, I'm talking about the last 5 years. The last 5 to 6 years have probably been the most disruptive for global shipping industry. First, it was the COVID-19 pandemic, correct? Then, the blockade of Suez Canal because of a shipping accident, where a massive container ship got stuck in Suez Canal, disrupting the movement of vessels for several days. Then came the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea as the Gaza war began. And now we have the Iran war. So, one after the other, there have been multiple factors which have disrupted global shipping, and this has created a big contingency in the global trade and shipping industry. And a country like India has become all the more vulnerable because the challenge is with such delays in shipping and blockade of shipping, it creates a big shortage of containers. See, it's not just about movement of ships and freedom of navigation. Beyond that, it's about logistics, it's about practicality. Now, to engage in shipping, to export something, to import something, you need these large containers that you see, which are mounted on freight carriers, right? And the problem is, India is heavily dependent on foreign produced containers. We don't produce enough containers. We rely on containers in other ports and foreign flagged vessels. We rent it out, we hire from them in order to export and import our goods. You know, China, which is a global leader in the shipping industry, it produces more than 1 million containers every year. You know, in comparison, how many India produces? India barely produces 24,000 containers in a year. Look at the difference. Compared to India's 24,000 containers produced every year, which is nothing but the metal container that I'm talking about. You might have seen them mounted on big trucks, right? They are the ones which transport them from ports to the hinterland. These containers are the ones which are carried by your ships, right? At ports, they are shifted onto these trucks. So India produces hardly 24,000 of the containers, which is barely enough, which is not even a small fraction of what we require. Whereas China, on the other hand, produces more than 1 million containers every year. So each time an Indian trader is looking to export or import something, they are busy hunting for containers, paying very expensive, exorbitant rates. Generally, a container might cost around $1,000. Now, because of the recent Iran war and the blockade of Hormuz and the backlog which has been created, the same container is going upwards of $3,000 to $7,000. The entire freight cost is touching $50,000, which is unaffordable for an average Indian trader. And also imagine the backlog. Now many ships are taking a longer route, avoiding the Red Sea route. They are going across the Cape of Good Hope, which increases the travel time by at least 10 to 12 days. If the travel time goes up, the entire shipping logistics gets disrupted, meaning the containers will take a longer time to become available. So we need to rent out or hire containers in other foreign ports and other foreign flagged vessels. By the time they reach India, plenty of time is lost, the cost goes up, and perishable goods are the first vulnerability. Perishable goods like seafood or agricultural products, they will start rotting. And this places a very high cost on the producer and the trader as well. So this is something India is looking to change. In the Union Budget of 2026-2027, the Government of India has announced a container scheme, a container manufacturing scheme with the allocation of 10,000 crore rupees. And as a result of the scheme, the first India-made EXIM container has been built, and a bulk order has now been placed by the shipping industry with this Indian manufacturer. So India is looking to scale up its container production capacity to reduce our dependency on foreign flagged containers and produce our own containers as much as required. Plus, India is also setting up the Bharat Container Shipping Line, a dedicated shipping line to deal with container traffic. It's a initiative by Shipping Corporation of India, along with Container Corporation of India and the port authorities of Jawaharlal Nehru Port, JNPT, Mumbai, and Tuticorin and Chennai. These major port authorities are collaborating with the Shipping and Container Corporations of India to establish a dedicated container shipping line called Bharat Container Shipping Line. This is India's first ever national container carrier. So, this is expected to ease the problems caused by the disruption in global shipping. India will not only produce domestic containers, but we will have our own national flagged container carrier, which will facilitate the shipment of containers from one port to another. Next, a tragic development in Vietnam. A boat carrying Indian tourists has capsized yesterday. Up to 15 Indian tourists have lost their lives. Now, this incident occurred at a popular tourist destination, the island of Phuoc, off the coast of Vietnam, that's located over here in the Gulf of Thailand. So be familiar with the location. And this tragic incident highlights the role of Indian foreign policy to extend support for Indians who are in distress. That is what we need to take away from here. The Indian embassy and consulate in Vietnam have already become very active, reaching out to the victims, their families, and providing the required support. So, this is one of the key responsibilities of the Ministry of External Affairs and its diplomatic missions abroad. So, this is a key point. It's an example that you can cite. The MEA is working overnight with the missions in Vietnam to ensure that all the required support is provided to the victims and the stranded families. Next, on page 13, there's a scientific study which has been published, which is relevant for geography and environment and ecology as well. A new scientific study has confirmed a long held theory that dams and reservoirs contribute to warm waters in the downstream. This is something experts had hypothesized from many decades, that when you build large dams and reservoirs and store the water, since you're pooling up the water, there is always a chance that the water pool tends to heat up, retain the temperature, and there will be a slight increase in the temperature. Even after you release this water downstream, for many kilometers, the temperature will remain high, higher than normal. And this is detrimental for aquatic life. It is detrimental for fish, especially for the fish breeding and spawning cycle. It can disrupt the entire marine and the aquatic ecosystems. So, this has now been confirmed with satellite data. A study that focused on several dams and reservoirs in the United States has confirmed that water stored in dams and reservoirs register above normal temperature And this water, when it is released, when the warm water is released from the dams, it will increase the temperature down the stream up to even 20 kilometers and beyond. And it threatens aquatic life and the natural ecosystems. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look at the small articles. On the front page, there is this image which Hindu has published on the occasion of World Population Day that was marked yesterday on the 11th of July. The United Nations and the global community, yesterday they marked World Population Day on the 11th of July. So, on this day, the United Nations promotes awareness about population related issues, about family planning, reproductive health, and such awareness is raised about population related issues and demographic issues as well. So, this day was initiated in 1989 by the UN Development Program. This day was chosen because it was on the 11th of July in 1987 that the world hit the 5 billion population mark. It was called the 5 billion day. So in 1989, based on the recommendation of Dr. K.C. Zakaria, who was a leading demographic expert at the World Bank, this day was instituted in 1989 by the UNDP. And it is marked every year where UN organizations, primarily the UNDP, coordinates with national governments to promote awareness about population related issues, demography related issues, reproductive rights, family planning, etc. Next, UN Special Rapporteurs have issued a notice to India expressing concern about the ongoing special intensive revision. As you know, under the SIR exercise, the Election Commission of India is sanitizing the voters list. And what has raised concern is that in every state, in every union territory, wherever the SIR exercise is being conducted, there has been a massive deletion of voters. Election Commission and the government say it is necessary to remove the ineligible voters to sanctify the voters list. But however, critics have been pointing out that probably there appears to be a intent, a targeted intent to aim at certain voters and get them removed from the voters list. That is the political allegation. So, since the issue has acquired global significance, as India is the world's largest democracy, UN special rapporteurs have issued notices to India asking for replies because it has been alleged that Muslim voters are being specifically targeted. That's the allegation which has come up from few quarters. And UN special rapporteurs have taken notice of this and have issued notices to India for the government to reply to these allegations. We had received similar notices from UN special rapporteurs during the NRC that was conducted in Assam, the National Register for Citizens, which was updated last decade. From 2012 to 2018, NRC was updated in Assam under the monitoring of the Supreme Court. Even then, such notices were issued by the UN special rapporteurs. So, what we need to learn here from an examination point of view is who are these UN special rapporteurs? What is their role? What is their function? What is their status? This can be a prelims question. See, UN special rapporteurs, they are not UN officers. They are not employees of the UN. They are not members of United Nations or its specialized agencies and programs and funds. They are independent experts in the field of human rights. Is that clear? They are appointed by the UN Human Rights Council, the UNHRC, to inquire into human right violations and allegations of human right violations that will come up. These special rapporteurs can be appointed specifically for a country or based on certain themes, on thematic human right issues like protection of religious minorities. There can be a UN special rapporteur. There can be a special rapporteur for, let's say, protection of ethnic communities. So, based on certain themes and specific countries, UN special rapporteurs can be appointed. These are independent experts appointed by UN Human Rights Council in the field of human rights. They have the authority to conduct fact-finding missions, to inquire into allegations of human rights violations. They can issue urgent appeals, notices, and formal letters to the concerned government asking for them to reply. That's what few special rapporteurs have done. The special rapporteur on minority issues, the special rapporteur on promotion and protection of right to freedom of opinion and expression, and the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and Belief. These three special rapporteurs have issued these letters to India, asking for India to reply on the ongoing SIR exercise. They can even submit their reports to UNHRC and the UN General Assembly. They come out with an annual report. If the expert is for a specific country, they'll issue a country based report. Or if the expert is appointed for a certain theme, they will issue a theme based report for that particular issue. These reports are submitted to UN Human Rights Council and as well as to the UN General Assembly. And accordingly, UNHRC and UN can act upon it as well. Now, coming to the next topic, the Jammu and Kashmir police, they have managed to secure a red corner notice from the Interpol against a wanted Hizbul Mujahideen terrorist. Is that clear? So, you need to know what is the red corner notice of Interpol. See, police and law enforcement agencies, they can request Interpol to assist in ongoing investigations. In India, the designated liaison agency to work with Interpol is the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation. The CBI acts as the point of contact. If any state police or law enforcement agency, if they want assistance from other countries in ongoing investigations, if they want to get a color coded notice issued from Interpol, they have to approach the CBI, which is the liaison with the Interpol. And Interpol can issue these color coded notices. So, red corner notice is one of the highest grade notice which calls upon international partners and foreign law enforcement to help in temporarily locating and arresting a wanted fugitive. A wanted fugitive who's pending arrest or pending a trial, who's wanted for serious offenses. You can request foreign law enforcement to locate them and detain them pending their extradition, following which India will push for their extradition through the legal process. So, red corner notice will facilitate in getting the wanted individual arrested temporarily by foreign police or foreign law enforcement. Now, there are other color coded notices. In fact, UPSC had asked a prelims question in 2026 prelims, and we had covered the exact same topic in our Conquer prelims sessions. Word to word, we had covered all the color coded notices, and UPSC had given a match the following type of question. Now, can you find out which are the other color coded notices and what is its purpose? For example, you have yellow corner notice. There is a white, blue, lot of different color coded notices are there. Please find out the entire list and what's the purpose. Mention that in the comment section below. Next, Indian scientists have discovered a deadly bird virus, the PaBV-4. It stands for parrot bornovirus 4. It mainly affects the cetacean birds, which fall under the parrot category. They belong to the genus Cetacean, which covers all the parrot family of birds, like parakeets, for example, or lovebirds, the cockatoos, macaws. All these birds fall under the parrot category. They belong to the genus Piscine, and they're affected by one deadly virus. It's the PaBV4, and it is lethal for them. Once infected, most likely the birds will die. So many such samples have been detected in birds which are still alive and even in the dead samples of these birds in Assam, in Karnataka, in West Bengal. So it highlights the threats because see, generally these birds are bred and reared in captivation, right? They're held in captive, they're held in captivity, and they're mainly traded as an exotic species. There's a big demand for macaws, cockatoos, lovebirds, or even parakeets, right? They're domesticated or developed as pets. So many of them are imported from other countries. And that is how this deadly pathogen might have entered India. Because generally the PaBV4 was found in other countries like US, in Canada, in Israel, in Japan and South Korea. Now that the strains have been reported in India, the two across Indian states, there is a real threat for the entire parrot family of birds, the piscine birds, because of this deadly virus. Coming to the last article, there is a deadly typhoon which is causing massive devastation across East Asia. It's called Typhoon Bavi. First, it caused widespread destruction in Philippines, bringing heavy torrential rain, causing landslides and killing a lot of people in southern part of Philippines. Then as it matured and grew in strength, it has moved towards Taiwan and the southern islands of Japan. Japan has few islands over here in the path of the cyclone, and especially the east coast and the northeastern part of Taiwan. They have been facing the entire brunt of Typhoon Bavi, and now it is headed towards eastern China. So China is bracing for its impact for landfall, which is expected to bring heavy torrential rain, cause flash floods and landslides. China is already dealing with unprecedented floods. You might have seen visuals on social media, right? And Typhoon Bavi is adding to the problems that China is facing. So multiple East Asian countries have been affected by this deadly disaster. Now coming to PIB, there was one important press release yesterday from Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. This press release referred to the BRICS ministers meeting. BRICS transport ministers, they met in Nagpur in Maharashtra to focus on cooperation in the field of mobility and road transport. So they focused on building the future highways and expressways and transport connectivity projects which are sustainable, which are clean, which align with climate goals. All these key issues were discussed. But what is relevant for our exams is that Union Minister Nitin Gadkari spoke about the success of PM Rahat scheme. So this can come as a prelims question. What is PM Rahat scheme? This is a newly launched insurance scheme, a cashless insurance for medical treatment for road accident victims. It is implemented by Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, and the funds are drawn from the Motor Vehicles Accident Fund. The various penalties, fines, and other charges collected under Motor Vehicles Act, part of it is deposited under the Motor Vehicles Accident Fund. Using this, the government has rolled out a cashless medical treatment facility for road accident victims to save precious lives, especially in the golden hour. So that is PM Rahat scheme. So please make a note of this. On this note, I bring the analysis to an end. I hope it was an interesting and insightful discussion. If you benefited, do let me know in the comments and press the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.